Warpugs, what is there to say about Biel-Tan? Biel-Tan is probably the ones that founded the militant wing of the Salvation Army. Warpugs, this comes requested from the Discord. This is HMS Atomic Dreadnought's request from PancreasNoWork, Craftworld Biel-Tan, the Eldar Imperium. Now, there is a lot to unpack with that statement. And the funny part is, it's all true, for the most part. You know, Biel-Tan is, to the Eldar, what the Imperium man is to humanity. They are massively militant. They have very little care or concern for anyone that is not Eldar. They are vicious. They will hesitate in no way, shape, or form to inform you exactly what they think of you at any time of the day, regardless of what's going on. Craftworld Biel-Tan is that Craftworld. If you're wanting to have a faction of Eldar who will commit as many war crimes or that they're capable of committing, which with Eldar tech, yes, you can commit quite the number of war crimes. Yeah, it's Biel-Tan. And since good times rhymes with war crimes, we're going to get into this. Guys, all of PancreasNoWork's links are in the description down below, right next to my own, including Patreon, including Amazon New House wishlist, everything like that. Special thanks to everybody that sent me some stuff to just get started here. Let's get into it. Craftworld Biel-Tan.
The Imperium of Man.
Yes.
It's a hot mess. There's a whole lot of negative descriptions I can give it, all of which the average Imperium fan will be happy to explain why they aren't actually bad things. No, it's not a bad thing that the Imperium is a dumpster fire that only hasn't gone nuclear because it's just that big of a dumpster. It's actually good. Yeah, and the Empire was just keeping the peace. Tarkin was just following the Emperor's orders. But you know, the Imperium hardly has a monopoly on being the worst.
No.
Some subfactions from other species in the galaxy are also quite xenophobic and are generally quite okay with murdering other species who made the mistake of existing in front of them. But in this case, I think that's entirely okay. Not because their motivations are actually good and pure, but
Because they're elves.
because they are elves and therefore correct about everything. Biel-Tan, the craft world of murder hobos.
Yep.
If the Eldar are acting aggressive, there's a good chance it's an invasion from this craft world. If they're acting aggressive while being pretty upfront with what they want, there's a very good chance it's these guys. And if they're acting aggressive while hurling a nearly non-stop stream of racial epithets in your direction, there's
It is them.
100% certainty that Biel-Tan has come to inform you of your place in life. And that place is as far away from their precious maiden worlds as you can physically get. Today, we talk about the craft world that saw the xenophobia of the Imperium, scoffed, and then decided to show these primitive humans just how racism is truly done. Because
This is all ridiculously accurate and how they wind up getting along. Calgar, I need an essay from Calgar about how he managed to get these guys to be okay with him existing within eyesight of them.
truly, it is the Eldar who excel in all things. But before we start talking craft worlds, tell me, do you want to be smart? Do you want to be smarter than you are right now? I should hope so, because there's always more to learn. And if you want to learn, there's no better place than Brilliant, the sponsor of this video.
Yay.
Brilliant is the place to go to learn math, data science, computer science, and more, with thousands of lessons and more added every month. But these
Yay.
aren't mere lectures. No, no, no.
Oh.
These are hands-on lessons designed to enhance your problem-solving skills that are far more effective at actually teaching you things.
And then maybe you can figure out why the Biel-Tan Eldar hate us so much. You really shouldn't have to ask that question.
You ever have to sit through a lesson or do an assignment in school that's nothing but mind-numbing memorization? I have. I had to give a few of them out during my early days of student teaching. They're no fun, and you barely learn anything, if at all.
Yep.
None of that here with Brilliant. You actually learn, and the lessons are engaging, so you don't need to sit there zoning out trying your best to stay awake. And since you can do them on your own time, there's no need to panic over deadlines. Do it every day if you can. There's nothing like setting a routine pattern to learn. But life gets busy. We all know it. And so does Brilliant, because even if you can only spend a couple of minutes here and there, Brilliant is perfectly fine for that too. A good start to lesson might be scientific thinking. As it turns out, there's a lot of interesting science that goes into making the world around us work, and whether it be for a career or just to learn some fascinating science, this is a great course to try out. And just to encourage you to try it out, I've got a deal for you. Using my link in the description and pinned comment, you get not only 20% off an annual plan, but a 30-day free trial. That's
Will be in the description, guys.
//brilliant.org/PancreasNoWork/ for a 30-day free trial and 20% off your annual plan. There's never a wrong time to learn something new, so try Brilliant today and make sure you never stop learning. Now then, time to talk about the Eldar Imperium. Biel-Tan is an Eldar craftworld, so it has the same origin story as the rest of the Eldar craftworlds. The rest of their kin were getting a bit too freaky, so they decided to hightail it out of there as quickly as they could. Almost every Eldar and Eldar god was consumed when Slaanesh came into being and was feeling romantical, and then shards of Cain landed in the heart of each craftworld and made all the Eldar go a bit nutty. Asserman and his students helped introduce the path system, Eldar all calmed down, everything's good again. Although in Biel-Tan's case, I'd be willing to wager they got a particularly big fragment of Cain given what was soon to come. Whereas most of the Eldar craftworlds were reeling from the gut punch that was the birth of She Who Thirsts, Biel-Tan was ready to go. They weren't going to sit there and cower, trying to regain their senses and achieve peace and balance and all that crap.
No, violence is the answer. We just haven't figured out how many questions it can answer yet.
They're the Eldar, damn it. They ruled the galaxy. What could this be but one more hurdle to overcome in their long and storied history? Fortunately for them, they had a key ally in their soon-to-begin crusade, Craftworld Iyanden. There'll be some retreading from another video here, but for the sake of telling the full story, Iyanden was the other craftworld that quickly began recovering and trying to salvage something out of the Eldar's fall. They had already provided the Eldar ample means of saving themselves during this time, chiefly among them helping to formalize the Infinity Circuits and the Spirit Stones the Eldar used to save themselves upon death as standard practice. Biel-Tan, for their part, didn't contribute too much in the way of practical things like that, but what they did have was a whole lot of spirit and energy ready to be thrown at whatever got in their way. And
what he really means is weapons. Lots of weapons and ammo.
So began an alliance that, to be fair to Biel-Tan, would last for thousands of years. Biel-Tan handled the western half of the galaxy, while Iyanden handled the eastern half. Together, chaos was pretty heavily purged from these regions, so you can politely thank these two craftworlds for ensuring the scouring went as well for the Imperium as it did. Horus heresied all over the galaxy, remember, and I doubt the Imperium would have been able to recover much, if at all, were it not for the effort of these two craftworlds. The issues that would lead to their split came from a difference in philosophy. Both of them agreed steps were needed to be taken if the Eldar Empire or even just their race in general was to survive. Maiden worlds would naturally be of utmost importance to this, being terraformed worlds the Eldar set to come into being after millions of years of development and growth. Iyanden's chief concern, however, and where the fracture comes from, was chaos. Their empire had fallen due to a newborn chaos god, and even if the forces they encountered weren't Slaanesh, you don't exactly want chaotic denizens as neighbors.
No.
Biel-Tan, meanwhile, saw that a whole lot of Maiden worlds were left in a bit of a sorry state, which for them meant a whole lot of freeloading aliens had set up shop on them. Humans, orcs, other species we never hear about because they don't matter, a lot of things that fell under the classification of not Eldar were living on these worlds.
Yes.
This angered Biel-Tan to no end, who saw these unmarked, otherwise empty worlds as clearly belonging to the Eldar first and foremost. It wasn't an immediate thing, granted. There was...
Basically, this is the craftworld that got pissed off somebody parked in their parking spot.
As I said, a good few thousand years of Biel-Tan reclaiming Maiden worlds and Iyanden colonizing them before the split happened. But come M34 and Biel-Tan getting in a war with the Imperium over a Maiden world, and Iyanden finally felt it couldn't follow Biel-Tan on their crusades any longer. The world was being claimed by the Imperium, and Iyanden saw that it had no benefit in helping them fight chaos, so they refused to send forces to help Biel-Tan in the conflict. Now, I paint my Eldar army Iyanden colors. I homebrew some lore for it, but they're Iyanden fellas tried and true at the end of the day. It's my favorite craftworld, so I'm naturally going to side with them in any arguments like this. Biel-Tan had gotten lost in the xenocidal sauce, and going out of your way to kill every perceived interloper is going to piss more people off than might be worth it. But in all fairness to Biel-Tan, just because it wasn't chaos dicking around on a Maiden world doesn't mean it isn't important to keep those safe. Those are a limited resource, and letting the Imperium ruin one so they can own another planet to forget about isn't a sustainable long-term strategy for the Eldar. Plus, ghosting your military ally, since that's pretty much what Iyanden did here, is a bit of a diplomatic faux pas at the very least. For Biel-Tan, though, it seems like at least in a militaristic sense, they didn't really need Iyanden. Because in this conflict, the Imperium deployed 10 Space Marine chapters and 2 sector fleets to deal with the Craftworld, and Biel-Tan obliterated them. It wasn't a bloodless victory, but Biel-Tan reigned triumphant, and all the Imperium had to show for this was a lot of dead Astartes and destroyed naval ships. Indeed, when Biel-Tan goes to war, it is a sight to behold. Craftworld, because Biel-Tan, unlike just about every other Eldar faction, can actually afford to wage a proper war. Out of all the Craftworlds, these guys are not only the biggest remaining, but the most militant by far. Their culture is all about being on the warpath, quite literally in their case, given the existence of aspect warriors. It's to the point that
Biel-Tan doesn't have much in the way of chill at all. They took it all personal.
unlike almost all the rest of the Craftworlds, Biel-Tan isn't ruled by its seer council. To be sure, their advice is heeded. The Eldar will always put some stock into their psychic talents, but the actual governing body of this Craftworld is a council of exarchs, aspect warriors lost on the path of the warrior and unable to leave it. The Craftworld.
So essentially, with the ways that the Eldar have, the Exarch is one that has become truly committed to one singular path in the martial area. In most craft worlds, they're shunned, but they're celebrated in Biel-Tan. Yeah, it goes without saying that a group of those guys ruling the place is going to have some definite militaristic overtones.
He'll even go so far as to revere Cain himself, which many Eldar, including legendary figures such as Jain Zar, refuse to do, given his status as the chief asshole of their former pantheon. This is a bit of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, you can be damn well sure these exarchs know what they're doing. They spend hundreds of years going to war and practicing how to do it best. They aren't going to be throwing Eldar lives into a meat grinder. Their decisions will take the Craftworld to the most effective and decisive victories. Exarchs may be lost to their bloodlust, but it's a tampered bloodlust. If nothing else, think of it this way. If you're smart with being a murder hobo, you can be a murder hobo for longer because you're not throwing yourself into pointless battles.
True.
On the flip side, they're exarchs. They're going to plot you the most efficient plan of attack possible, but suggesting that perhaps the Craftworld can solve things in a non-violent manner is going to get you some funny looks from them. To again be as fair as I can to the Craftworld that goes against what my personal choice in army is all about, there's a lot of problems in the 41st millennium that can't really be solved with words. Tyranids, orcs, chaos, you can't talk your way out of a coordinated invasion.
No.
Even beyond that, they for the most part don't go wiping out all life on every single planet they pass by, just maiden worlds. Even then they do sometimes go like, hey, this is our maiden world, it's time for you to leave, and offer anyone on there a way out. It's just that if you can't or won't take them up on that offer, you get murdered. And of course, while Iyanden has indeed suffered terrible losses, going from the most to the least populated craft world, they've allied with everyone from the Grey Knights to the Dark Eldar. Biel-Tan itself even sent them some forces when High Fleet Kraken was invading Iyanden, so they're apparently nice enough that even Biel-Tan doesn't stay that angry with them forever. As it turns out, playing nice means people will be nice back. Biel-Tan, meanwhile, goes it alone more often than not, and you can make an argument that it turns their need for a massive military into a self-fulfilling prophecy. They strike out, their actions and attitude necessitates a bigger army, they strike out with a bigger army, rinse and repeat. At the very least, they do pick and choose their battles. They aren't strictly speaking fighting any wars of expansion, just wars to protect maiden worlds and the surrounding areas. Leave those alone and you'll probably be fine, unless one of your descendants 1,000 years down the line might moderately inconvenience someone from Biel-Tan or a maiden world, then your whole planet's getting glassed. All that said,
I'd love to say he's joking about all this. He's not even approaching joking yet.
this is a wargame setting. Hard to fault someone for being militaristic in it. And like I said before, this has allowed Biel-Tan to easily be the least defeated Eldar Craftworld. At least that's what we're told before we get things like the Fracture of Biel-Tan, but we'll get to that soon enough. Biel-Tan isn't going to be doing anything like getting into a war of attrition with the Death Corps of Krieg.
No.
That's not happening. But their population and focus on the path of the warrior means they can to some extent withstand attrition. Many Craftworlds cannot do something like keeping forces stationed in reserve for a particular battle. It's all or nothing. What you see on the field is what the Eldar are capable of deploying. But Biel-Tan can do this. They can strike down at any area and have their losses replenished at a moment's notice. They can afford to take riskier or wider-reaching plays that might result in more casualties that other Craftworlds simply can't. I imagine it's part of why Biel-Tan is the Craftworld featured in Dawn of War. No one else could afford to wage a war as depicted in those games, with a constant stream of troops being sent in to replace those defeated. I mean, for the love of God, 10 Space Marine chapters at once. Can you imagine damn near any faction in the setting, much less an Eldar Craftworld, pulling that off? They can afford to keep a battle going even after other Eldar would have called it quits. Even more than that, you know how sometimes the the Eldar and Imperium like to ally in moments of desperation, like against chaos or Tyranids. Biel-Tan will also do that, except if they feel the need or desire, they can also immediately switch gears into attacking the forces of the Imperium the moment the other threat is dealt with. Might as well kill 2 birds with 1 stone and all that. You might think that's a dickhead move, but you have to admit you gotta be pretty powerful to pull that off. As for how they fight, there's a fun word for it that honestly sounds kinda dwarfy. Bazakain. Translated into English, or Low Gothic for those of you getting a bit too into things, it means swordwind. It's even the name of the Eldar battle theme in Dawn of War 3, and is a quite fitting song for the Eldar. In practice, the broad strokes of it are rather less elegant than the name might make you think. In terms of tactical and individual skill, it is of course replete with all the grace and martial skill the Eldar are known for. Aspect warriors aren't slouches. In the big picture of the battle though, the swordwind is basically just bull rushing whatever poor bastard is facing Biel-Tan with aspect warriors.
Nice.
One moment all is nice and quiet, the next the sky is filled with swooping hawks, howling banshees are screaming towards you, and fire dragons are destroying any armor you might have before it has a chance to even be crewed. Beyond that, they do have a unique variant of a night spinner called a void spinner. It's the same as a regular night spinner.
Biel-Tan, if I were to make an Eldar army, which I'm not, it would be them.
Only the monofilament wires it shoots out are coated in a parasite that eats any and all living matter. Great for dealing with orcs, and great for crossing off a pretty good chunk of the Geneva Convention while you're at it.
Yeah, good times rounds with war crimes.
Relating to treating prisoners well, but that's because you can't mistreat a captive if you've rendered them into their component parts. Might as well talk about it a bit now. The Fracture of Biel-Tan. This story features an avatar of Cain being used, so you can already take a guess how things turn out, I'm sure. Although in all fairness, it's not quite that bad. While Yvraine was doing Ynnari things, Skarbrand and the Mask decided invading Biel-Tan would be a good way to kill some time. The Ynnari attempting to gather the Crone Swords was a bit of a threat to chaos, so they figured they'd stop it. And since multiple were on Biel-Tan, they figured they'd just go blow up the place before the Ynnari could get them. Although truth be told, I assume this was more of a motive on the Mask's part. Skarbrand probably just wanted to kill. He even tried to kill the Mask and the Slaanesh forces present, somehow being talked into a temporary alliance by the Mask. It appears the
2 forces that I never see really getting along at any point are Slaanesh and Khornes. Just saying.
The only hatred more potent than Khorne versus Slaanesh is GW versus the Eldar getting a W. The inhabitants of Biel-Tan, for their part, initially weren't too involved in the Ynnari business, but they're very involved in both protecting Maiden Worlds and having their Craftworld not overran by demons. Since the way Skarbrand and the Mask were going to get onto Biel-Tan was a webway gate on a Maiden World, this qualified as both of those things. A force was sent to stop them, which ultimately failed when the Mask found the portal, and Skarbrand did what he does best and smashed his way through it. On the Craftworld's end, they had sealed most of their webway portals, but apparently not all of them, and the Mask was able to hypnotize some Eldar with Slaanesh beauty charm crap to allow the rest of their forces in. Jane Zar, who is here by the way, takes on the demon forces with a whole load of howling banshees. The summoned avatar of Cain even managed to do something almost unthinkable. It killed Skarbrand. Of course, they mutually killed each other, but hey, at this point, I will absolutely count that as a victory for the guy.
If you don't know, the Avatar of Cain has gotten raffle stomped by just about everything in existence, and I'm pretty sure every named Ultramarine has beaten an Avatar of Cain to death at least once with their bare hands. They have almost completely ruined the Avatar of Cain as a unit to be feared. Fulgrim choked one to death, and I don't know how you choke an Avatar of Cain to death, which is a statue of molten metal, mind you. I have nothing.
Zar managed to defeat the Slaanesh forces present, but then the Mask slipped into Biel-Tan's Infinity Circuit and just started eating Eldar's souls left and right. Eventually, the Ynnari did arrive, and with both Eldrad and Yvraine, so they meant business, and they managed to stem the tide and halt the demon invasion. Unfortunately for Biel-Tan, though, getting the Mask out of the Infinity Circuit took a bit of an explosive ritual on the Ynnari's part. With both the Mask in it and Iyanden being summoned, the Infinity Circuit was drained of a massive amount of Eldar's souls, and this event is called the Fracture of Biel-Tan for a reason. The entire Craftworld started falling apart, and it ended up shattering and its populace moving onto the massive fleet of ships Biel-Tan keeps as the main Craftworld could no longer support them. Bonesingers are doing their best to repair it and just keep it from falling apart, but most people are now on ships. To make matters worse for the Craftworld, half their population is now gone, either having joined the Ynnari, become one with Iyanden directly during the ritual, or just plain old dead. Of course, if you think this has in any way reduced their fervor and ego, you'd be as wrong as possible.
Right.
Biel-Tan has, if anything, everything doubled down on how fanatical they are, and those that remained have renewed their crusades with earnest. And ironically enough, their Craftworld falling apart and them living on their ships has, if anything, helped them in this regard. Because they don't need to centralize anything, individual parts of the fleet can strike at a moment's notice. In some ways, they can bring a higher concentration of forces at once, because they're moving as a bunch of ships rather than slipping through webway portals. No longer does the whole Craftworld need to marshal for war, instead they can just jump out of the webway en masse and glass a planet as a fleet. Indeed, not long after the fracture, they dealt with chaos forces threatening 3 maiden worlds all at the same time. With the help of the Phoenix Lords Bararoth, Fuegon, and Karandras, they stopped all of the demon invasions threatening those worlds. Afterwards, they found the planet the ones who summoned the demons lived on, and then obliterated the entire thing with a psychic storm. It had life on the surface 1 second, and then the next it had no life on its surface.
That's called the WMD. I had something funny, but
Seems like no matter what happens to them, as far as Biel-Tan's concerned, it's only a matter of time and effort until the galaxy once again belongs to the Eldar. Now, since the Eldar 10th edition Codex is still a non-entity, there aren't really any rules for Biel-Tan on the tabletop. But nonetheless, I shall give you do or don't Biel-Tan. Mostly based on their lore, but a little bit of the tabletop based on the models that should make up a Biel-Tan army. For lore positives, Biel-Tan are the Eldar with a military force that can be used for more things than desperate hit-and-run attacks. If you want to see the Eldar properly going to war, Biel-Tan is what you want. And if you are an Eldar supremacist to the point that you view non-Eldar in the same way the Imperium views non-humans, you want Biel-Tan. They are ruthless towards the other races of the setting, especially those that occupy a maiden world. As far as they're concerned, and as far as I'm concerned, the Eldar are the rightful rulers of the galaxy. They're in a bit of a
we can all be wrong.
Slump now, to be sure, but they've ruled the galaxy for 65 million years. Of course there's going to be downturns every now and then, but through their efforts, the Eldar shall reclaim what is rightfully theirs, and what is rightfully theirs is nothing short of complete dominion over the galaxy. The upstart Imperium, the corruption of chaos, the infantile Tau, all of them and more shall be blown away into the swordwind's currents. They're also
Can we do the Tau first, please?
Not a bad choice if you want your Eldar to be a bit more upfront about what they want, and if you're generally not a big fan of the Eldar shtick of being all mysterious and mystical and stuff. They do get up to those shenanigans every now and again, such as in Dawn of War, but for the most part, they'll tell you exactly what they want. They want you to get the hell off their land. If you don't, they're going to murder you. There are no double meanings or prophecies here. They're just going to kill you. And last lore positive, if you want some Eldar with a history of actually winning, this is the best bet you got.
Yes,
3 separate demon invasions halted at once in recent lore. They once beat 10 Space Marine chapters and 2 entire fleets at once, like I keep banging on about. And when their Avatar of Cain was killed, he managed to get a mutual KO, which by his standards might as well be a complete and decisive total victory. Against Skarbrand, of all people, too.
Like, the Avatar of Cain actually killing somebody that they're supposed to be able to kill. I didn't read the book that he's specifying here for Biel-Tan, but if I had read it, I would have been in shock. I would have had to set the book down and just stared at it in disbelief.
I mean, good lord, that's impressive. For tabletop positives, you get to bring a whole host of aspect warriors, so you're naturally going to have the greatest Eldar strength of having all the tools you need to win in a nice specialized package. Fire Dragons, Howling Banshees, Dire Avengers, these are the true heart of the Eldar war machine, and Biel-Tan has them in spades. But with recent lore, you do have some room for Wraithguard in the army, since they've turned more towards them now that half their population is just dipped out. So you aren't shoehorned into just using aspect warriors and night spinners now if you want a fluffy Biel-Tan army. Since aspect warriors are relatively cheap, at least compared to taking an abundance of wraith units like Iyanden, you can field a reasonably large army for these Eldar as well. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Playing an army of Biel-Tan gives you the potential to actually outnumber your enemy, much like they have the potential to in the lore. For lore downsides, your Craftworld is currently ripped apart and spread out across the galaxy. They do travel together for the most part, but you are in the strictest of sense no longer actually a Craftworld. Half your population is dead or hitching a ride with the Ynnari, so the total capacity of Biel-Tan to wage war has been severely hindered in some regards. They can be a lot more hit and run now, and their efforts in protecting Maiden Worlds has gotten them some new recruits from those places in recent times, but there's no denying this faction is on the back foot for now. If you also want something a bit more reasonable, you will not find that something here. Biel-Tan hates you for daring to think you can claim their galaxy, so if diplomacy is part of your vocabulary, it's best you look elsewhere. They're like aggressive isolationist fallen empires in Stellaris. Your options are either don't come anywhere near them or get obliterated. For tabletop downsides, since Biel-Tan
until you have enough to actually go and tackle the fallen empire, and then you use them as a secondary source of research. I'm just saying.
It's all about aspect warriors, they're naturally going to have the exact same weaknesses as aspect warriors. You've got toughness 3 across the board, so a stiff breeze is going to knock your army on its ass. And of course, if one of your units is out of position, the swordwind is going to be closer to the butter knife breeze for how effective it actually is. You can't march wraiths up the table with zero thought like glorious Iyanden. You need to actually think about where your units are going and what they'll be facing. And of course, you're buying aspect warrior models. Sometimes this isn't bad, like with the Howling Banshees and Jane Czar. Those gals have some good models. Other times, it's like almost every other aspect that they're missing Phoenix Lords, and your models can drink, drive, and run for the House of Representatives in the United States. They're so old. Topping it off, being a larger Eldar army means you gotta buy more models, which means more time and money on all the stuff that falls under. The models themselves, assembly, paint. The swordwind does not come cheaply. Best to get an avatar of Cain to go with this army. They do worship him, so he's not only a fitting choice, but a good way to save a couple hundred of both points and dollars worth of aspect warriors. And last downside, their color scheme is white and green. Green is fine, white is hell.
Yes.
Have fun. And that was Craftworld Biel-Tan, proof that the Imperium isn't even the best at xenophobia. Thank you as always to my wonderful channel members. You are the superiority complex to my Biel-Tan, supporting me in all my endeavors, worthy or no. She bail on my Tan till I Craftworld. No, I can do better. She bail on my Tan till I swordwin. She bail Tan.
Stop.
She Tan bail me when she bail on my swordwin. Tan she when me when you're bail.
Stop.
I want to fuck an Eldar.
God. Warpugs can love bloom on a battlefield. The answer is no, you heretics, it can't. Okay, so despite how much PancreasNoWork wants to get it on with an Eldar, they don't want him. And Biel-Tan would want to shoot him for even the thought. Warpugs, of all the craft worlds that I could possibly get behind, it's Biel-Tan. Just because Biel-Tan, they seem to be the least naive of all the other craft worlds about the universe and their position in it. They do not seem to carry the same hang-ups as the other craft worlds when it comes to, you know, deciding that violence is the solution to every single problem that they have. Warpugs, I'm gonna head out from here. If you would, just leave a comment down below. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. I'm getting barked at by my little tiny. I'm gonna get out of here before it gets even louder. I'll catch you guys next time.